Hello everyone. So in this video we're going to kind of wrap up talking about form elements by talking about one of the more important form elements, because at this point we've looked at kind of the majority of the form elements that you'd want for a simple form, but you still got to be able to do something important with that form, and that's submit the form. So we're going to look at HTML form buttons in this video. And we can implement a button in two different ways, and that's going to be the primary purpose of this video. And we're going to have a look at those we're going to talk about form buttons, and we're going to have a look at those two different ways that we can implement a form button. So form buttons, after a user inputs the requested information, buttons allow the user to put that information into action. So most commonly, a submit input or a submit button is used to process the data. So we have two different types of inputs here. We have essentially an input with the type of submit, and we have an HTML5 button. And so those are going to be the focus of what we're going to talk about in regard to creating a button for our form. So the first one that we're going to look at is our submit input. So users click the submit button to process data after filling out the form. So the submit button is created using the input element with a type attribute value of submit. So the value attribute is used to specify the text that appears within the button. Now, this submit input has been mostly depreciated with HTML5. There are certain instances where we want to use this button with certain applications. However, for the majority of our purposes, I'm going to tell you that you can use the HTML5 button. So we're just learning about this button to learn about this button's existence and know that, we can use it if we need to use it or want to use it. So this is what our sample code looks like for a input type submit. So we have our input type, which is submit, the name, which we've given as submit, and then the value, which is the text that shows up on the button, and we've left that as send. So let's jump into our code pen and make this ourselves. And so this is the code pen that we've been using here for the last couple of videos. It's our big, unwieldy, bad form. And so we're just going to add an input. Let me zoom in here so you can see this a little bit better. We're going to add an input with the type of submit. We're going to give it the name of submit, and we can name it whatever we want, but for most submit buttons, submit is fine, and the value is whatever text that we're going to display on it. So for this purpose, I'm going to put send form right in there like that. Now remember, our input element is self-contained, self-closing. So there's our send form button. So let me add a break here after our select. So there's our send form input submit element. Just a standard button. We can customize these buttons. A little bit, and we'll look at that more in a future video. But making a button is just that easy. Or you would think it was just that easy. It's actually a lot easier than that, especially when you use the regular HTML5 submit button. So as an input element, the submit button is self-contained and can't wrap any other element. So if more control over the structure and design of the input is desired, along with the ability to wrap other elements, then what you really want is the button element, which is the HTML5 button element. So the button element performs the same way as the input element with the type attribute value of submit. However, by default, it includes opening and closing tags which may wrap other elements. So we can include things like strong tags for bold text on a button, or any other thing like that. We could actually add more styling elements to our button thanks to this HTML5 button element. So by default, the button element acts as if it has a type attribute value of submit. So the type attribute value can actually be omitted from the button element if you want to. Makes it even easier. So rather than using the value attribute to control the text within the submit button, the text that appears between the opening and closing tags of the button element will appear. So here's what that looks like. So we have this button, name equals submit. And then we actually have a set of strong tags, using them on our button text. So part of this button text is bold, while the other part is not. And so I think it'd probably be a good example just to kind of code this button. So let's head back over to our CodePen and code this button. So we'll put a break here. We'll add our button tag. We'll give it a name, and we'll give it the name of submit. And we'll add our text on here. And let me zoom in so you can see this just a little bit better. We'll add our strong tags. Strong. Send us \strong a message. And then we'll close our button tag. And there we can see our HTML button element, and it's a little bit different. You can see that we have that bold text on top of that button there, which is something that you can't do with that input submit element. So we have a lot more flexibility in this HTML5 button element that we don't have in the regular input submit element that used to be the only thing you could use. It's also a little more flexible for styling, which we'll look at in some future videos. So that's all that I have for you for this video. Thank you for watching.